Okay, in this video we're going to demonstrate how to remove and replace the power head PCBA. To start, you have to remove the fuse from the pocket, disconnect the motor cable and the heat sensor cable from the wire. Alright, so we start out by taking the fuse out of the pocket, disconnect the motor cable, and then pull the heat sensing cable from the conductive tape. Next, we loosen the screw that ties the PCB to the housing. Make sure you grab the washer here. It's the washer that clamps the PCB down. After the PCB screw with the washer is removed, proceed to removing the ribbon. Once we have the power head upside down like this, we need to proceed to removing this cover plate. It's got 3 screws, need to be loosened. Should be able to just pull it out of the way. Next step is to remove the motor unit from the power head housing. There's 2 screws in the front and 2 screws in the back corner that need to be loosened. Get to the screwdriver. Be nice to have a nice flashlight while you're working with this, because it's a little tight in the back. Okay, so once you have these 4 screws loosened, should be able to pull the motor out on the opposite side. Now we're ready to remove the motor from the power head unit. As you start pulling on this, note that there's a ceramic block which is a brake resistor. You need to cut this tie down so you can separate it from the motor. once this is released, you should be able to pull the motor out of the power unit. You can see here. Then you can just set this aside for later assembly. Next, what we need to do is remove the PCB A, which is this one here, and the battery connector assembly. This has 4 screws from this side, and the PCBA has 1 screw from the top, from the opposite side. And let's not forget to cut this zip tie here to release the cables. Just make sure you don't cut the cable, because I've done it before. To remove this battery connector, which is really part of this PCB, there's 4 screws that we need to take out of this battery connector housing. One of the screws is under the PCB, so you have to take this PCB or take it out of the way so you can get access to that screw. So we'll just start by moving this PCB. Okay, now we can see the 4 screws here that we need to take out. Oops. That's gonna happen. We should be able to pull this connector out. To do that, we gotta get these wires here. Let's go like this. All these wires have to be pulled because they're part of the PCB. And notice I'm going around this this rib here that's in the housing, so to get them out of the way from everything else from the motor. Yeah, you can do it one at a time, it's probably easier. The whole idea is that all of them have to come out. Assembly is ready to come out. Then we'll go ahead and lift the PCB assembly out of the housing. As you notice here is that the battery connector, this is what you will get as a service part, and the battery connector is part of the service, and so is this ceramic block. Now we're going to start putting this PCBA assembly together. starting with the battery connector, which is part of the PCBA. You get this as a service part. And there's a little trick to it. Took me a while to figure this out, but once you do, it's pretty easy. You slide it in through here and then drop it in the housing. Let's do it one more time. Hold on just a minute. We'll do it one more time just for ease here. You got the battery connector, you have the housing, you turn it and then pull it in. Next we'll put in the battery latch assembly. So you have the latch itself, and make sure you have the spring on the back, goes through this pocket here, and then the battery latch button goes on top here, and then you have the complete pre-assembly ready to drop into the main housing. Now that we have all of these parts in this housing, we have to take this whole assembly and install it in the housing. You got 4 screw bosses here, and you have to align it and then screw it in. Okay, now this latch assembly is seated in the housing. We can go ahead and fasten it with the screws. Quick tip: when you're assembling this, when you're pulling this from the bottom of the housing, make sure that this slot here fits on a small plastic post in the housing. Once you get that in the post, then you can screw this PCB down and lock it into the housing. Then plug in your ribbon. Now we're going to take this PCB and drop it in from the bottom. And this way we can grab it from the other side and mount it to the housing. Okay, you can see how the slot from the PCBA is around the post from the housing. And then there's only one screw with the washer here that clamps the PCBA onto the housing. Next, we're going to assemble the fuse. And the trick here is just to make sure that the wires are in the traps. And then also make sure that the motor connector is on the bottom side, and the heat sensor wire is also on this side. Next step is to pull these 5 cables from the wiring harness, and all 5 have to go in and route it through the back of this structure. Like this. Like so. Just make sure that you have all the wires in this wire path here, and then zip tie them together. Okay, now that the wires are strapped in, we're ready to assemble the motor from the other side. Next step is to secure the ceramic block to the motor post with a zip tie. Next step is to secure the motor to the housing. I'll turn this upside down. And then fasten with the 4 screws. Now that we have attached the motor to the housing, make sure that you plug in the motor cable and the heat sensing cable, and then wrap it up with conductive aluminum tape. Next, we'll turn it back upside down and install this cover plate under the wires here with 3 screws. After you install this cover plate, do a quick check. You should have 5 cables coming out the back. Next step is to drop the power head into the deck. Now we'll fasten the power unit to the deck with these 4 bolts. Now we're going to reinstall the blade. We're starting with the fan assembly. Just put this over here. And then before you install the blade, put a screwdriver in here for the anti-rotation of the blade as you clamp it. Make sure that all the washers are around the shaft. There's a D, there's a flat on everything, and everything gets oriented by that flat. Once you get it in place, then you just tighten this to the right torque. Now we're ready to do the final wiring. Start by fastening the blue and black connector, and continue to fasten the rest of them. Go to the blue and red. Let me see here. Oh, okay. You have to, there's only one way they can go together. Just watch the connectors. Finally, we need to connect the two red wires by means of soldering or using a wire splice connector. Now the wiring is complete.